There have been a lot of Spider-Man movies released over the years, but there have also been a lot that haven't been released. These are all the Spider-Man movies and spin-offs that were in development, what they were going to be about, and why they were cancelled.
Stings, doesn't it?
In 1985, Canon Films bought the rights to Spider-Man for $225,000 dues, which is about $750,000 in today's money. The deal would last 5 years, where Marvel would receive a percentage of the revenue from any of the films produced during that time. The chief executives for Canon Films, Venom and his cousin Yorman Globus, didn't understand the character of Spider-Man, so the initial script, written by Leslie Stevens, reflected this. You ready? The very Marvel named Peter Parker was going to be 10 years old and exposed to radioactivity, turning into a giant spider. Believe it or not, Marvel's Stan Lee wasn't happy with the movie being a horror or having almost nothing to do with what was written in the comics, so asked they make a different screenplay. Ted Newsom and John Brancato then came on, whose story involved Peter in college, mentored by the very Marvel named Otto Octavius, who were both caught in a Cybertron accident, giving them each their powers. It also altered Otto's brain, who wanted to rebuild the Cybertron to create electromagnetic abnormalities, but Spider-Man must stop him to prevent New York City and the world from being destroyed. Joseph Zito, who had already worked on a Canon film, Invasion USA, was on board to direct, who brought Sabrina the Teenage Witch creator, Barney Cohen, to rewrite the script, where he added more action scenes and gave Doc Ock the catchphrase, "Okie dokie." The movie was well and truly moving forward, with the director scanning locations and Canon budgeting 10 to 15 million to make the film. Names considered for the title character included Tom Cruise and Scott Lever, who was an actor and stunt performer. Bob Hoskins was considered for Doc Ock, while Stan Lee wanted to play the very Marvel named J. Jonah, Jimmy, Jason, Jackson, Jordan, Jasmine, Jordan, Josephine, Jessica Jameson, Jr. Because of the financial failure of Superman IV, The Quest for Peace, also produced by Canon Films, the budget for their Spider-Man film was cut in half. This led to Joseph Zito dropping out as director, being replaced by Albert Pune. More rewrites were done to make the movie cheaper, which included replacing the villain with an original character, the Night Ghoul, who was a scientist turned into a humanoid bat-like creature. However, Stan Lee rejected this and went with the lizard instead, which I have no idea how a humanoid lizard is cheaper than any of the other options. Scott Lever, who was considered for Spider-Man, had read each of the many drafts of the script and stated that it went from good to bad to terrible. Even after spending over $1 million on pre-production, the project was cancelled due to the financial crisis Canon Films were in. Just to give you an idea of how bad their situation was, in 1987, they produced 34 theatrically released movies, including the fourth Superman film. Now, I couldn't find the budget or box office numbers for all of them, but from the information I have, they spent $129 million and only made 87. Only 2 of their movies made more at the box office than what their budget was, and not by a lot either. And remember, just because a movie makes more money than its budget doesn't mean it's profitable. The budget doesn't include things like marketing or the amount that their cinemas take in. Canon Films was then bought by Giancarlo Peretti, who was later found to be a corrupt financer, where chief execs Venom and his cousin Yorman Globus parted ways. Globus remained with Peretti, while Golan went to run 21st Century Film Corporation and was able to keep the rights to Spider-Man. He went to Marvel to extend the licensing deal, which was agreed, adding another 2 years. Golan planned to start filming in September of 1989 with one of the versions of the already written script, but financing difficulties remained and they ran out of time to make it, where the rights for Spider-Man reverted back to Marvel. Despite having written many versions of this Spider-Man script, it didn't all go to waste, with many of these ideas being used for the Canon film Cyborg, released in 1989 and starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. While Venom of 21st Century Film Corporation was trying to get his Spider-Man movie made, he sent the Doc Ock version of the script out to different production companies to option on. James Cameron had gotten one of these scripts and went to Carolco Pictures with it in 1993, where he intended on casting Arnold Schwarzenegger as Otto. A few months later, Cameron updated the script and submitted a 57-page scriptment, which is part screenplay, part story outline. This version no longer included Doc Ock, instead the villains were Sandman and Electro, but not the Sandman and Electro you know from the comics. Electro was Carlton Strand, a corrupt capitalist, instead of Max Dillon, the electrician, and Sandman was Boyd instead of Flint Marko. Because Sandman and Electro were set to be the villains in this movie, it meant that they weren't allowed to appear in Spider-Man the Animated Series. So if you've ever wondered why those characters were never used, blame James. Actually, don't blame James, he's pretty rich, he might sue you. In 1996, companies that weren't rich were Carolco Pictures, 21st Century, and Marvel, who all went bankrupt. MGM acquired 21st Century's film assets, which included the Spider-Man scripts. But did they? There was a whole legal thing over who actually owned Spider-Man between MGM, 21st Century, Viacom, and Marvel. It turned out the rights had expired when 21st Century had him, so MGM never had it. Anyway, because of this legality, James Cameron's version of Spider-Man couldn't be made, and in 1999, Marvel licensed the character to Columbia Pictures. The 2002 Spider-Man movie that was made used several elements from James Cameron's iteration, including Peter being in high school, getting bitten by a genetically modified spider on a school field trip while taking Mary Jane's photo, he had the organic web shooters, MJ and Flash Thompson were dating, and Uncle Ben died. Other elements not used was that Spider-Man was going to be a TV sensation, like the comics, Peter and MJ partnered up for a school project, and the villains, who used their abilities to steal money and create a smear campaign against Spider-Man. They kidnapped Mary Jane, who Spider-Man was seen kissing, to force Peter to join them. Spider-Man confronts them, turns Sandman into glass, and battles Electro on top of the World Trade Center, where the villain falls to his death. The movie ends with Peter and MJ graduating high school before starting a long-distance relationship as Mary Jane pursues a medical degree. MJ realizes Peter is Spider-Man because his kiss is the same as Spider-Man's kiss. It's also worth mentioning that this movie would have definitely been R-rated due to the amount of violence, coarse language, and even sex scene between Peter and MJ on top of the very Marvel-named Brooklyn Bridge. Leonardo DiCaprio was James Cameron's first choice to play Peter Parker's Spider-Man, who would later be cast in 1997's Titanic. No! There have been a number of attempts to make a Venom movie over the years, going all the way back to the 1990s. Because of Marvel's financial troubles, New Line Cinema had the rights to Venom, but, fun fact, not Spider-Man, which means he couldn't appear. Anyway, David S. Goyer wrote a Venom script that focused on Eddie Brock and Cletus Cassidy's rivalry. You can actually read the whole script, it's available online, but to summarize, a symbiote would have crash landed on Earth on an asteroid, having come from a planet of giant spiders. Eddie and Cletus attended the same orphanage since they were young, which would start their rivalry. Also, Eddie in the comics is spelt with an I-E at the end, but in the script, it ended with a Y, which is kinda odd. I don't think it would ever been written down, so I don't know why it was changed. Dolph Lundgren was the first choice to play Eddie Brock / Venom, should the movie ever get made. But it didn't, because New Line didn't like the script, and sold the rights of the character to Sony Pictures, who had Spider-Man. The next attempt at a Venom movie was going to be a spin-off from Spider-Man 3. Now, you may be wondering how that's possible, seeing as though both Eddie and Venom died. Well, Spider-Man 3 was originally going to have Topher Grace play Eddie Brock as a minor role, saving the Venom persona for his own spin-off. Venom was later added to Spider-Man 3 because the producers believed it would please fans as a fan-favourite character. But even after this movie was released, the idea for a Venom spin-off re-emerged, hoping the character would be the Wolverine to Spider-Man's X-Men, in the way that he would be someone who gets many movies around the marquee films. This means it was going to be set in Tobey Maguire's universe, even though, again, Eddie Brock and Venom died in Spider-Man 3. While the script was being written, Sony was concerned that Topher Grace couldn't carry a film, but others were suggesting he remain, as he was a likeable actor who audiences could sympathise with. Paul Rennick and the very Marvel-named Rhett Reese, who have written things like Zombieland and the Deadpool movies, wrote a version that was said to be grounded and a dark take on the character. Gary Ross was hired to direct, but Topher Grace was almost certainly not going to be asked back to play the title character. This was made certain in 2010 when Sony decided to end this Spider-Man universe, putting the spin-off on hold to focus on the reboot. A reboot that was also going to feature a Venom spin-off, although very little is known about this iteration other than it being written and directed by Alex Kurtzman, who co-wrote The Amazing Spider-Man 2, a movie that showed us symbiotes within this universe exist as revealed in the Oscorp files. It was also said to be released between The Amazing Spider-Man 3 and 4, but all of this was cancelled due to the underwhelming financial and critical reception from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, leading to another reboot. Other than that, there were rumours that it was going to be titled Venom Carnage, starring Finn Wittrock as Eddie and Alan Tudyk as Cletus. Despite none of these Venom movies coming to be, Sony did eventually give us a Venom movie in 2018 starring Tom Hardy set in his own universe, which received 2 sequels, making a combined total of nearly $2 billion dues at the worldwide box office. So at the end of the day, Sony made the right financial decision to push through and make a Venom film. We're Venom! Prior to Sam Raimi coming on to write the 2002 Spider-Man movie we know, Seven director David Fincher was developing the movie. The reason Fincher was let go was because Sony didn't like his script. One of the reasons was because Dave didn't like the idea of making an origin story, finding it ridiculous that someone would get powers after being bitten by a spider. However, he did intend on opening the movie as if it was a music video with a 10-minute title sequence explaining Peter Parker / Spider-Man's origin. I imagine it would have been something like what we saw in 2008's The Incredible Hulk, but 7 times as long. Peter would then be grown up, have Mary Jane die, and meet Gwen Stacy, flipping the love interest order from the comics. Sony didn't want to rush through all that backstory and parted ways with Fincher. Despite not liking his idea, Sony reconsidered him for The Amazing Spider-Man after having just directed Andrew Garfield in The Social Network, another movie distributed by Sony. It's unclear if this version would have also gone without an origin, but he intended on killing Gwen Stacy in the first film. What does Fincher have against Peter's partners? As for the film's villain, Fincher wanted it to be the Green Goblin. While Sony once again decided to go in a different direction, it seems like the reason David Fincher missed out on both was because he was skipping over too much lore, leaving out Peter's origin and killing off characters straight away.
This is my gift. My curse.
While Tobey Maguire did get a third Spider-Man movie, there were other ideas proposed before it became the Spider-Man 3 we know. Initially, the villain was going to be Vulture, with Sandman as the secondary antagonist. The Vulture would have already had his suit at the beginning of the movie, where Spider-Man catches him in a robbery attempt, sending Toomes to prison. He would then share a cell with Flynn Marko, who too had already gained his powers, and the pair would team up to break out of prison along with other inmates who created chaos across the city, drawing Spider-Man out so Vulture and Sandman could confront him. Apparently, Vulture was removed because he had no personal connection with Peter Parker, which is why Sandman was updated so he could be tied to Pete. Harry Osborn's Green Goblin took Vulture's place, and Venom was added due to the character's popularity in the comics and animated shows, hoping that would lead to additional revenue from toy sales and merch. Although, it's kind of weird that Harry wasn't considered as a villain from the beginning, seeing as though they literally set him up to be in Spider-Man 2. As for the film footage in Spider-Man 3, there was a significant amount of elements removed, like Peter interacting with the symbiote, hearing its voice, and Sandman forcing a scientist to develop a cure for his daughter's illness, but later revealing that she was incurable. This would lead to Flint's daughter pleading that he give up villainy so she could die knowing he was good. Marko would then use this as motivation to apologise to Peter before the final battle, which would have just been against Venom. There was also more of Eddie Brock and Gwen Stacy's non-relationship, with Brock constantly trying and failing to go out with her. So when Eddie sees Pete with her, he kidnaps Gwen instead of MJ for the final battle, and Mary Jane goes to Harry to ask that he help Peter in the climax of the film. But a movie like this can't be 4 hours long, and I guess they just like some ideas better than others.
This is something else.
A fourth Tobey Maguire movie was planned and had a release date slated for May 6, 2011. Development on the movie began a year after Spider-Man 3 in 2008, with the director of the previous 3 films, Sam Raimi, once again attached to direct. Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, and Bryce Dallas Howard were also set to return. The movie was going to open with a montage of Spider-Man taking down a bunch of C-list villains, including Prowler, Rhino, Shocker, and Mysterio, played by Bruce Campbell, paying off the idea that his character in the previous movies were all the same person. Both Kraven the Hunter and Lizard were considered to be the main villain of the movie, before eventually settling on Vulture, with John Malkovich cast in the role. The villain was to fight Spider-Man early on in the movie before dying and having his daughter Felicia Hardy, played by Anne Hathaway, taking up the mantle. Instead of Felicia Hardy becoming the Black Cat, like in the comics, she would instead be the Vultress. Spider-Man himself was also set to have a slightly different suit, making it look convincingly more homemade. Outside of those ideas, little is known about the plot of the movie, but the film was well into development, with a significant amount of concept art already drawn. Spider-Man 3 had an estimated budget of $258 to $350 million before marketing, making it one of the most expensive movies ever made. However, Spider-Man 4 was expected to cost even more, with the directors' and actors' salaries going up. There was a rumour that in order to save money, Kirsten Dunst would have been written out of the movie and have Gwen Stacy or Felicia Hardy take the role of Peter/Spider-Man's love interest. Apparently, director Sam Raimi pushed Sony to have Kirsten return, plus more creative control over the film after being forced to put Venom in Spider-Man 3 when he had no interest in doing so. Sam also wanted to finally pay off the Kurt Connors cameos from the previous 2 Spider-Man films by having Dylan Baker return to play the Lizard. However, Sony wanted a villain with a face that would be able to express emotions better. Which, if true, is ironic, seeing as though the film that replaced Spider-Man 4, The Amazing Spider-Man, had Lizard as the main villain. There were rumours that Sony wanted multiple villains again, preferably ones that look visibly interesting, like Electro or Carnage. James Vanderbilt, who had just written Zodiac, was hired to not only write Spider-Man 4, but also the 5th and 6th movie. Robots and Inkart writer David Lindsay Abari was hired to rewrite the script. Pleasant Hill and later the Hunger Games screenwriter Gary Ross came in for another rewrite, before Spider-Man 3 co-writer Alvin Sargent was brought on for yet another rewrite. Raimi was struggling to connect with the scripts and told Sony that he wouldn't be able to meet the release date deadline, leading to Sam parting ways with the project. A year before Spider-Man 4 was set to be released, Sony made the decision to not move forward with the project at all, and instead reboot it with The Amazing Spider-Man, which came to theaters a year after the original Spider-Man 4 date. The quick turnaround was due to a reboot script being written on the side as a backup plan in case Sam Raimi dropped out or the budget got too high. Despite all this behind-the-scenes chaos, Sam Raimi and Sony have both said that it was genuinely an amicable breakup. Raimi wanted to make a 4th film because he was unhappy with the 3rd and hoped it would end his time on a high, so he didn't want to settle for a script anything less than what would have been the best Spider-Man movie of them all. Therefore, Sam told Sony they should instead just go ahead with the reboot he already knew they were planning. Sony co-chair Amy Pascal thanked Sam for not wasting the studio's money and appreciated his honesty. Because of this mutual respect between both parties, Raimi and Sony separated on great terms. I love a good respectful parting of ways. Keep that drama to reality TV.
Listen, if you'd like, we could say you became ill.
Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man got 3 movies before it was cancelled. Andrew Garfield's only got 2. But a 3rd Amazing Spider-Man film was planned and had a release date slated for June 10, 2016. However, this was later pushed back to 2018 when Sony decided to make a Sinister Six movie first. But not just one movie, the film was set to be a 2-parter, with the first being released on November 11, 2016. Drew Goddard was attached to write and direct the Sinister Six movies, which were said to pick up directly where The Amazing Spider-Man 2 left off. But there's conflicting reports as to whether Andrew Garfield would be in one part, both parts, or neither. The end credits of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 hinted at the lineup, which would include Vulture, Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Mysterio, Kraven, and Rhino. But apparently this was not necessarily going to be the final team. While plot details are not confirmed, there were rumoured ideas like Harry Osborn leading the team with the goal of destroying humanity and going on a mission to recover an alien meteor, which would later be revealed to be Venom. Osborn wanted the symbiote, but Spider-Man would disrupt these plans, unintentionally bonding with Venom and fighting the Sinister Six. Other ideas included Doc Ock betraying the group, going rogue, leading to the remaining 5 battling against him with Spider-Man's assistance. There was also the possibility of having the very Marvel-named team being controlled by the government, determining when and where to enlist their services. A similar idea is what would end up being used in another 2016 movie. It was also said that the story would have a redemption arc for the characters, but at the same time, trying to kill Spider-Man. The Amazing Spider-Man being rebooted is the main reason for the film's cancellation, but in recent years, Drew Goddard said he's willing and ready to make a Sinister Six movie if Sony decides that's something they want to do, saying that the script could still be used today. While we may not have got Drew Goddard's Sinister Six movie, or one set in Andrew Garfield's universe, it looks likely that Sony will make a Sinister Six movie at some point in time, considering they keep teasing it.
I think a bunch of guys like us should team up, could do some good.
Intriguing.
Following the Sinister Six 2-parter would be The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Not much is known about the plot other than some surface level ideas that would focus on Peter coming to terms with Gwen's death. George Stacy actor Dennis Leary said in 2015 that Peter would have developed a formula to bring back people in his life who had died, including Gwen and Captain Stacy. Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 director Mark Webb had also confirmed he wanted the very Marvel named Chris Cooper to return and be the film's main villain. So basically anyone who died in the previous movies would come back. Except Uncle Ben. There was even speculation that The Amazing Spider-Man 3 would be released before the Sinister Six 2-parter. Peter would get the black symbiote costume in The Amazing Spider-Man 3, be wearing it in part 1 of the Sinister Six, before being separated from it and latching onto Eddie Brock, becoming Venom for part 2. This would then lead to a Venom spin-off film, so even the spin-offs would be spinning off spin-offs. Try to say that 5 times fast. The spin-offs would be not found immediately. The underwhelming box office and mixed reviews for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the reason for all these cancellations. Yes, it made $700 million, but with a budget of around $400 to $500 million, including marketing, it probably just broke even. Because remember, studios don't get all the money from the box office, a significant percentage goes to movie theaters. Personally, I would love to see the continuation of both Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man universes. People love these versions, and a continuation of either of them would make money at the box office. I think you can have multiple Peter Parker Spider-Man movies running at the same time. DC seems to be doing that with Batman, so why not Spidey?
Peter 1, Peter 2, Peter 2, Peter 3, Peter 3.
In 2014, Sony wanted a female superhero spin-off set in their Amazing Spider-Man universe. They hired Lisa Joy to write a screenplay, eyeing a 2017 release date. Black Cat, the very Marvel named Silver Sable, Stunner, Firestar, and Spider-Woman were some of the characters considered to either lead or team up in the movie. Black Cat made the most Spidey sense, seeing as though she was introduced in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, played by Felicity Jones. However, when the Sony Marvel Studios partnership was agreed upon and decided to reboot their Spider-Man, this idea was put on hold. That was until 2017, where Sony was developing a Black Cat and Silver Sable movie titled Silver and Black, written by Christopher Yost, who co-wrote Thor the Dark World and Ragnarok, and directed by Gina Prince Bythewood. It was said to be a part of a shared universe with Venom and other Spider-Man adjacent characters. And when I say this, it was initially intended that Venom and all these spin-offs would be set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe without referring to it. This would give them the potential to have Tom Holland's Spider-Man appear if they should choose. With a release date scheduled for the 8th of February 2019, production was set to begin in late 2017, early 2018. But because Sony wasn't happy with the script, they decided to postpone. The decision was then made to make a solo Black Cat movie and a solo Silver Sable movie before teaming them up later. Instead of starting from scratch, pun intended, the initial Silver and Black script was reworked to be the Black Cat movie while they looked for another writer for Silver Sable. It's currently 2025 and neither of these movies have been released, but as far as Spider-Man spin-offs, Black Cat is one I would genuinely love to see. So if Sony's looking to reboot their spin-off universes, I think they should start with a Black Cat or Silver and Black movie. Despite getting to the stage where they were almost about to film a version of the Silver and Black movie, little is known about the plot. All we know is that it was going to be a dark buddy movie likened to Thelma and Louise. The pair would initially battle each other before realizing they need each other to defeat a greater threat that would either be the Chameleon, Tombstone, or Tarantula.
Oh, but I like to play.
While the Amazing Spider-Man universe was still running, Sony intended on adding to the list of spin-offs with the Spider-Man 2099 movie. Planned to be released in late 2017, it was said to be set in 2099's New York following Miguel O'Hara as Spider-Man going up against the corporation Alchemax. Setting a movie in 2099 would have made it difficult to connect to the Amazing Spider-Man universe, except the idea was to have Morlun as the villain, who travels across multiverses, killing spider variants, so this could link to Andrew Garfield's world. Eventually, Miguel and Peter's Spider-Man would team up and battle Cletus Cassidy, but I'm not sure if that was going to be the same movie or a different film. However, the movie was cancelled for the same reason most of these Amazing Spider-Man spin-offs were cancelled, because it was rebooted. But Miguel O'Hara's Spider-Man did appear as a major character in the animated Spider-Verse franchise.
I'm from the future.
How dare you point at me?
You were pointing first.
Rude to point.
You're being very rude.
In November of 2014, Sony Pictures' emails were hacked. One of the pieces of information leaked from this was talks about making a crossover movie between Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. It was initially going to have the two characters fighting each other before teaming up to battle a greater threat. That's pretty much all the information we have on that, but considering this was all in talks around the same time Sony decided to once again reboot, it explains why it was cancelled. However, if you've seen Spider-Man No Way Home, you'll know that we did eventually get the pair together on screen. Plus, another Spider-Man played by Tom Holland.
This is Peter Parker, Spider-Man.
Because of the underwhelming reception and box office of the recent Spider-Man spin-off movies, it seems like those universes are done. Now, no sequels had officially been announced, and all the future spin-off films haven't officially been cancelled, but I think it's pretty safe to say this universe is done. Having said that, they had many attempts to make a Venom movie, so all these other ideas that are floating around might eventually come to be.
Whatever the future holds, we'll be ready.
Now, I've also made a video talking about the other cancelled Marvel movies, which you can watch in the description, and I said I was going to do a video for X-Men movies too, so that'll come at some stage.
They call me the Gambit.
Do they? Are you sure you didn't just really want them to, but it never quite worked out?
Anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments which of these movies you wish was made, and don't forget to absolutely obliterate those like, subscribe, and share buttons. I'm just kidding. Only do it with enough force that it registers. I don't want any of you breaking whatever device you're watching this on.